to set that up. And then preparing the speech was, in particular, if we come into meditation with a lot of chit-chat, particularly negativity in our mind, we can use a little breathing exercise to help let go of that. And also breathing exercise can help to relax the body a little bit. And I think you experimented a little bit with that 9-round breathing exercise with Maya this morning. And then, of course, take 3 deep breaths or count breaths or whatever. There are many variations, and that's part of preparation if we need it. And the other preparation, of course, is preparing the mind, is really just bringing the mind into the present moment and really having a good motivation for the meditation. Okay, so let's now have a look at these preconditions. And these are presented as conditions, these are presented in the meditation text as sort of prerequisites or conditions if we want to engage in a more intensive shamatha retreat. How to set up ourselves with those conditions to support that retreat. But I think you'll find that these we can apply to our everyday life. That if we take care of these sorts of conditions, then that will be very helpful for us as a support for meditation practice in general. And so here, of course, this is all also mentioned in Attention Revolution from Alan Wallace. So I'd like to just read a little bit as we go through the points, and there are 6 preconditions or 6 prerequisites. And this is on page 50. He says, "When I lead shamatha seminars, I like to think of them as expeditions rather than retreats. The word retreat has the connotation not only of withdrawal but also of defeat, and that certainly isn't the spirit of such practice. The word expedition, on the other hand, suggests adventure, conquest and exploration. The Latin roots of the word have to do with extricating yourself, literally stepping out of some situation in which you've gotten stuck. In the practice of shamatha, we discover how deeply our minds are trapped in the twin ruts of excitation and laxity, or in other words, dullness and distraction. In the Buddhist tradition, a mind trapped in these ruts is said to be dysfunctional, and in order to make it serviceable, it is helpful to step out of our normal activities, seek out a spacious sense of solitude, and explore the frontiers of the mind. This expedition doesn't require blind faith or allegiance to any religious creed or metaphysical belief system. Over the past 3 millennia, contemplatives from various Asian cultures with diverse belief systems have followed the path of shamatha to its culmination, and they have reported their findings. We don't need to accept their claims simply on their own authority, but if we're inspired by earlier accounts of the benefits of this practice, we may venture forth on this path to see for ourselves whether we can achieve the results of the contemplative explorers who have preceded us. There are great adventures ahead, but also perils and dead ends. Sometimes the path is clear, but now and then it may seem to disappear altogether. The purpose of relying on those who know this path from their own experience is to save time. 6 prerequisites for sustained rigorous training are set forth in many Indian and Tibetan Buddhist meditation manuals. These are some of the essential causes and conditions that will produce the fruit of shamatha. And the first of the 6 is a supportive environment. This is sort of the outer condition. And a number of points are usually mentioned here. And again, it's in the context of, like, if you're doing a retreat setting, so some of the things that are mentioned here in terms of supporting the environment are easy access to food and water and so forth, to be in a safe place, to be in a place that is not full of disease and so forth, a place that is also quiet and not noisy. But the one point here that I really like to emphasize is often it's called here is to have good friends, or in other words, the idea of sangha, spiritual community. That I think if we're venturing forth on any sort of spiritual path, we need help. If we have this idea, I can do this myself, I think you're going to find it extremely difficult, if not impossible. And I know from my own personal experience and talking to many, many people. When I first came into contact with Buddhism, I did some courses, I was very enthusiastic, I wanted to change my life. At the time I was living in Australia, so I went back to Australia. I wanted to really change everything, meditate every day and move in a better direction in my life. But basically for 2 years, nothing happened. Zero. Because what happened was, where I went back to, there was no Buddhist centre, no one interested in any of this. So I was on my own, and what happened was, I just got swept up in my old habits. So no matter how much I wanted to meditate every day and change things, it just didn't happen. It was only after 2 years that I found myself in a new environment with some sangha, some spiritual community around me, that I managed to actually start to do something. In my case, of course, I went off to do a study program in a Buddhist centre, but I'm not suggesting that you have to do that. But at least we need to find this sangha, this spiritual community. It can either be a sort of an established sort of group or centre, or it could just be more informal, just some friends, like-minded people. But we need to find these people, and we need to get connected, we need to get help, and we need to help them. Because if we try it on our own, and maybe some of you have done that a little bit already, my experience in talking to so many people, it's extremely difficult. Because generally the environment we live in the modern world is sweeping us away in the opposite direction. Most of the things around us. Unless, of course, you're very fortunate to live in a more spiritual environment in general, but that's very uncommon. Normally we're in a busy, hectic lifestyle and go, go, go and get by stuff and all that things. And so you'll find that you're like swimming against the current, and it's very difficult. So we need help, find these people, get connected, meet together, support each other, and then we can maybe make some progress. So this is part of supportive environment. So let's see what Alan Wallace has to say about that. It is important to practice in a safe, quiet and agreeable location, optimally with a few other like-minded people. This should be a place where food, clothing and other necessities are easily obtained. And again, he's talking about in a retreat setting. Finding such an environment sounds simple in principle, but in practice it can be very difficult, especially if you try to devote yourself to practice for months on end. And that's unfortunately the case, that if you really want to go and do some personal retreat somewhere, it's very difficult to find a suitable location. I know from experience in talking to many, many people. But fortunately, that's changing a little bit now, because I think more and more people are realising the value of this, and more people are interested in this. And so now slowly, we're starting to find some more of these retreat places becoming available to be able to do this. So that's the first of them. That's the supportive environment. That's like the outer conditions. The other 5 are what's called inner conditions. So let's have a look at those and see what they entail. The next two sort of go together. Is having few desires and being content. And so both of these are, of course, with respect to material things, money, wealth, possessions, and so forth. So, of course, if all of our energy is devoted towards earning more money, getting more stuff, accumulating more stuff, then, of course, one, the mind is going to be quite agitated in trying to do that. And then we're not going to have any time and energy to devote to meditation and developing ourselves, because all of our time and energy will be sucked into that. And few desires is with respect to things that we don't have, and being content is with respect to things we do have. So let's see what Intention Revolution says about those 2 points. The first of these 2 prerequisites refers to having few desires for things you don't have, and the second refers to being content with what you do have. Without these 2 qualities, your mind will never settle down in the practice. You will be constantly thinking of things you want but don't have, and you will fret that your current circumstances are inadequate in one way or another. This does not mean that you must quell your desire for happiness, but it is necessary to refocus your aspirations on transforming your own mind as the means to genuine well-being. And for this to happen, you must see the limitations of a life driven by such mundane pursuits as wealth, luxury, entertainment, and reputation. All these circumstances can give you is a temporary spurt of pleasure that tapers off as soon as the pleasurable stimulus stops. Mental balance is the gateway to finding genuine happiness, and Shamatha is the key that opens that gate. And then the 4th point is somewhat related to those 2. And that is to have few activities, meaning to simplify our life. You know, I often hear people say, "Oh, I'd really like to meditate, but I simply don't have time." I think that's never a valid excuse. Of course, it's probably true that most of us have very busy, hectic lives, and our day is full of activities, and we don't have enough time to complete them all. But, of course, and some of these activities are essential. Most of us have to work at some level to have enough money to have a roof over our head and food and so forth. And some of us maybe have some family responsibilities, maybe some other responsibilities. But above and beyond these essential activities, we tend to fill up our day with lots of stuff. And we often tend to do that for one of 2 reasons. One is that it's often felt like in the modern world, if we're not doing something, we're not being productive. So do something. And of course, the other thing is that if we're not doing something and we're just sitting there quietly, that sort of forces us to look at the state of our mind, which is a mess. So we don't like what we see, so we just distract ourselves, we busy ourselves, so we don't have to look at our own mind. And this was really very much highlighted in a study they did not so long ago, and I think probably a number of you have heard about this study. This obsessive compulsion to do things. They had participants in a room, and it was just a white room, nothing in the room, just white. And then they had a chair in the middle, and they asked the participants to sit in the chair quietly for 15 minutes and do nothing. Do nothing. The only option is that they gave each participant a little device that could give themselves a painful electrical shock. Painful. can guess what happened. I think it was something like 69% of men preferred to painfully shock themselves and sit there quietly and do nothing. And I think one participant shocked himself 90 times in 15 minutes. 90. I mean, it wasn't pleasant, it was painful. But we had to do something. Women were a bit better. I think 25% of women preferred to painfully shock themselves and sit quietly and do nothing for 15 minutes. That's the state of our mind. So again, we fill up our day with lots of stuff, and a lot of this doesn't really bring us anything, and often it can be very expensive as well, and sometimes detrimental to us, these extra activities. Now, of course, what we could do is try to forcibly cut these things out of our life, but I think you'll find it's going to be a struggle. Rather, we can do, as often recommended in Buddhism, is to reflect on what's called the preliminaries, the foundation practices. And in fact, the first two foundation practices in Buddhism that are often mentioned are very helpful here. And the first is to reflect on our precious human life, to reflect on the fact that we're not just human, but we're living in a time and place where we have a lot of opportunity to make our life meaningful. And we also have a desire to make our life meaningful. I mean, we only have to go back in history a short time to see that in past history, people didn't have these opportunities. They were just struggling to survive. But now, many of us, at least in the modern world, have a lot of opportunity to make our life meaningful. And a lot of these spiritual traditions now are at our fingertips, which wasn't the case earlier in history. To really appreciate that, and so to really have this aspiration to make our life meaningful. But then together with that, the second reflection is very helpful, and that is to reflect on death. Because even though we may appreciate that we've got a precious human life full of opportunities, yes, I want to make it meaningful, but I'm sort of kind of busy now, with my career thing, so, I'll do that spiritual stuff later, maybe when I retire or something. And of course we keep putting it off and we never begin. So, and then what happens, of course, is later in our life, as we're approaching death, we look back and we see how we've wasted our life and we're full of regrets. So to avoid this, these two reflections, precious human life and death, can not only get us to see we've got a precious human life full of opportunity, and let's make it meaningful now while we have that opportunity. And if we really internalise these, and of course intellectually, probably intellectually we know we've got some opportunities, and intellectually we know we're not going to live forever, but they don't have any effect. That's why we need to internalise them, bring them inside, meditate on them, experientially appreciate this precious life we've got, and it's not going to last forever. In fact, we don't know how long it's going to last. And if we really internalise that, I think what you're going to find is that you're simply going to lose interest in all of these things that you fill up your day with that don't really bring you anything. You're not going to want to waste your time on it. In fact, recently on some social media, I saw a lady who had a terminal illness, like cancer or something, and she was posting and she was pleading with people not to waste their life on meaningless activities. And then, of course, also often what we see is that people who've had near-death experiences, who've directly seen death and come back, often their lives are completely transformed. They can really then, they understand what death is, and they appreciate the preciousness of life, and often they're full of enthusiasm to make their life as meaningful as possible. And then one other thing comes to mind now is, on this point, is some years ago, teaching on something relating to this, there was, again in Dharamsala in India, one of the ladies one of the students, she was an Irish nurse who worked in the hospice movement, caring for terminally ill people. And she told me that it wasn't uncommon that if the people she was caring for, if they got past the first stage of denial, they got to the point of accepting that they're going to die, she said it wasn't uncommon if they got to that stage, it wasn't uncommon for them to tell her that getting the terminal illness was the best thing that ever happened to them in their entire life. Because now they understand the preciousness of life and they want to take an opportunity. So of course we don't need to have a terminal illness, near-death experience. Simply do these reflections and we can have the same enthusiasm and motivation to make our life meaningful. And on that point, I'd like to read 2 paragraphs from a talk that Steve Jobs gave some years ago to students at Stanford University. And I'm sure you all know who Steve Jobs was. He said, "When I was 17, I read a quote that went something like, 'If you live each day as if it was your last, someday you'll most certainly be right.' It made an impression on me, and since then, for the past 33 years, I have looked in the mirror every morning and asked myself, if today were the last day of my life, would I want to do what I'm about to do today? And whenever the answer has been no for too many days in a row, I know I need to change something. Remembering that I'll be dead soon is the most important tool that I've ever encountered to help me make the big choices in life. Because almost everything, all external expectations or pride or fear of embarrassment or failure, these things just fall away in the face of death, leaving only what is truly important. Remembering that you're going to die is the best way I know to avoid the trap of thinking you have something to lose. You are already naked. There is no reason not to follow your heart." So I think some good advice there from Steve Jobs. Question?
And Sarah, we practiced the death meditation. It was very powerful for me.
Mm-hmm.
Can we do it here?
Which death? There's a number of different ones. Which death meditation? What was it? Was it like?
It was like
imagining you're going to die,
yes,
or something, and
that was the decision. I think it was a 9-point death meditation.
like.
No, it was. I think it's 9 years ago. I've been there 4 years ago.
There's at least 2 or 3 different ones there.
It was like we're going to die now in the bed. And,
oh, you're actually going through the process.
No, like now, and we see everybody and we say goodbye. And
oh, okay, yes, no, it's the no, the other one. No, the other one. Not the dissolution, not the elements, but just imagining that.
Like the first half.
Anyway, I think Maya will lead you in that, and I'll give it
We'll talk about it.
You've done it plenty of times.
Yeah.
I think it's one of your favourites. So we'll see if we can slot that in somewhere in the coming days.
You said that 2 and 3 are about objects, like...
Well, about material things like money, wealth, possessions.
But you can also have like desires or content about relationships. If you're not content about some relationship in your life and you want to improve it, that also keeps you busy because you want to work on it.
So this is really to do with things out there are going to make me happy. So of course and I think Alan mentioned, we need, and here the word desire doesn't mean craving, attachment, it means aspiration. You know? So of course we need to aspire to cultivate more loving kindness and compassion, improve our relationships. But here it would be like running around looking for people who are going to make me happy, you know. Having that, not few of those desires, thinking that person's going to make me happy, that one's going to make me happy, that one's going to make me happy.
Okay, and what about being content?
Yeah, same thing. Being content is, again, with respect to the material things. So, again, I think he's saying never be content in terms of improving yourself and improving qualities and so forth. So that, we need to have a lot of aspirations to improve ourselves and never be content with the level of our development. That we need to work on, but the external stuff, that's we need to sort of put in perspective. Okay, so the next one is ethical discipline or ethical lifestyle. So I think this is, well actually I didn't read from the attention revolution, I think on the previous point. So a few activities first. When you are devoting yourself to Shamatha training, it is important to keep other activities to a minimum, or if your behaviour between meditation sessions erodes the coherence of attention you have gained during sessions, then you won't be able to gain any ground. Given the fast pace of modern life and the general emphasis on keeping busy, it can be difficult to make this shift to simplicity. Our work can be a kind of narcotic, concealing the unrest and turbulence of our minds. And a lifestyle that alternates between hard work and hard play can keep us constantly busy, without ever gaining a clue about the meaning of life or the potentials of human consciousness. So now, ethical discipline, and I think, of course, here, certainly from a Buddhist perspective, ethics is the foundation, but I think ethics is really the foundation of any sort of meaningful lifestyle. And here, in Attention Revolution, Alan Wallace sort of expands on because generally ethics, and the base level, we talk about avoiding harmful behaviour. But he sort of expands on that a little bit, so I'd like to read what he says. A necessary foundation for balancing the mind is ethical discipline, which is far more than merely following social rules or religious commandments from an external source of authority. To live harmoniously with others, we need to practice social ethics. And to live harmoniously within our natural environment, we need to practice environmental ethics. The practice of ethics involves avoiding harm to others by means of our physical, verbal or mental behaviour, and leads to social and environmental flourishing in which whole communities may live in harmony with each other and with their natural environment. A third type of ethical discipline is psychophysical ethics. To promote inner well-being, we need to practice ethical ways of treating our own bodies and minds. This includes taking good care of the body, following a healthy diet, and getting the right kind and amount of physical exercise. It also involves engaging in mental behaviour that is conducive to balancing the mind and reducing disturbing mental states such as hatred, greed, confusion, fear, and jealousy. And then the last point is eliminating compulsive thinking. Because this really, as you may have seen in meditation, we have a lot of compulsive thinking going on, but also in daily life it really creates a lot of problems in daily life, all this obsessive compulsive thinking. And there's a couple of things I think we can do here that can be very helpful for this. One, which I mentioned in terms of in the breaks here, is that when we are doing some sort of physical activity, eating meals, going for a walk, or anything like that, is to be completely in the senses, to be fully present in that sensory experience of eating the food, or walking, or lying in the sun, feeling the warmth of the sun on your face, and so forth. And that way, by being fully present, of course, we'll enjoy the experience much more, and we can start to let go of that blah, blah, blah mind.